Hey guys, quick little announcement for Fishing the DMV. Our Weekend Warrior membership group on Patreon is nearly full. There are only 20 spots still available. Once these spots are gone, they're gone, and I'll be closing the club to any new members until 2026. At that point, you can try to join again, but it'll be at a higher rate. So get your rates locked in now, and you'll gain access to our 5 fishing tournaments each year for Patreon members only, 5% off your orders to Jake's Bait and Tackle, 10% off your order to Tiger Crankbaits, 10% off your orders to Catoctin Creek Rods. You'll gain access to our private Facebook group community, loads of members only content, and of course, ad-free, commercial-free episodes of the show. You get all this for $6 a month, which is less than a pack of Cincos or a jackhammer chatterbait. Lock in these rates now because in 2026, I'm going to be increasing the rate to new members. And again, I'll give you an extra one here. I'll give you 8% off if you buy the membership for the year. So that'll be $66 for all of this value. There are only a few spots left, so hurry up and check out the link in the episode description. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens. Today, I have a special guest, Jake Shiner. Jake is here to really talk to us about his journey into fishing, specifically the world of crappie fishing. Something I'm trying to do more of this year is branching out outside of bass and snakehead and attaching or hitting some of these other tribes, which is catfish, muskie, walleye, and of course the crappie. Jake, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
So, yeah, what's your story? How did you get involved in fishing?
So I really just I didn't really grow up fishing too much. It really started when a lot of people started fishing during COVID. I fished up until then. A lot of time I had family. A bunch of my family lives in Montana. They all fly fish. Kind of grew up fishing over there, but wasn't totally loving it. Didn't really like fly fishing personally. It's not my forte. It's a little bit harder than, doing it the other way. And I would go with one of my friends, and we'd go in my backyard and we would catch all these little bluegills, sometimes catch a bass. And at that point, I'll tell you this, I wouldn't even touch the fish. I would always have my friend unhook it. Didn't want to touch the fish or anything like that. Didn't want to have anything to do with it, but I did enjoy it. It was really fun. And then COVID hit and I was home with one of my buddies and there's nothing to do. I had this kayak. My dad had old kayaks in the back of the yard. I had this fishing rod. I had a couple baits, went out to the local lake. I live over in the Burke area, went to Huntsman Lake and started fishing there. And pretty soon I went once or twice. It was really just to hang out with the boys, do some high school activities, if you would, out on the lake. And then, just hang out with my friends and we'd fish and, we would catch these bass that they weren't nothing big, but it kind of was like, oh, so we start watching YouTube videos, getting really into it. And then a couple months into it, I'm out there with my mom of all people. She doesn't really come out fishing with me. My parents are divorced now, so she lives in Montana. My dad lives over here in Virginia. She's in town. I take her fishing and we're on a canoe with a little bitty trolling motor on the side, no fish finder or anything. And I'm fishing. It's like mid-April at Huntsman Lake. And with the wrong bait, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm fishing a crankbait with I think it was fishing a spinning rod or something. And I throw it on the bank and this huge fish comes up and takes it. And, I'm fighting the fish and, wow, this is a huge fish. Next thing you know, we get it to the boat. And I had a little bitty net at that time, actually the same net that I was talking to you a little bit ago about. And I net him up and it's this huge bass. I mean, seriously, we measured it was 24 inches long or 23
Wow.
inches long. I have to look at my pictures. But I was just like 3-4 years ago and I first got into it. I'm like, what the heck? I didn't even know you could catch like a bass this big in in a pond. It's basically a pond, essentially a glorified pond, Huntsman Lake. And it, really inspired me to get more into it. So then I got into really into the small boats because around here in Northern Virginia, if you're not fishing Potomac River, or you're not driving to Lake Anna or somewhere further around there, you're not shooting off a big motor and whatnot. So I got into small little boats, and I got like a pond prowler from Cabela's, and I started in that. And I really got into like kind of backwaters bass fishing where there's no pressure. And I got pretty lucky that my dad was in the military, and so he retired Air Force, and I'm very thankful for that and the opportunities that I got with that. But aside from that, you get your kids get this student. It's like it's almost like your identification card for the military if you go on base. And so they have these there's Quantico military base, and I could go there with this little boat, and they have like 5 lakes there, and they have this one pond back there that just has a numerous bass in there. And there's if you know Quantico base, it's basically one of the smallest ponds on there, and you can put a little bitty kayak or a pond prowler, for instance, you can put that on there. And so kind of got into it through that, and it really exploded through that pond prowler of the customization ability. I customized it with my dad. That's the one thing I will say. I didn't grow up fishing with my dad. My mom was the one who fished, but my dad was really good with the technical side of things, rigging up wiring and doing like some handyman stuff. And so he helped me build this little pond prowler out, and it was awesome. And so that really sparked me into a lot of other things. And so that really paved the way. I don't know if you want me to dive more into that.
No, dude, that's awesome, man. You were on a roll. What really came next in your journey? Like with, we mentioned offline Livescope. Was Livescope a newer edition, or is that something you've had for a couple of years? That's
a pretty newer edition. I would say in my fishing career, if you would, it started about 5 years ago. So 2020, 2019 ish. Really 2020 it started, and then I didn't get Livescope till this time last year, and that really got into it. But from there I know a lot about it, and I got really in tune with like Livescope, as you would. Hate it or love it, I think it's one of the greatest things to ever come out. I mean, it's one of those things where it really does change the game. If you know how to use it properly, it can really change the game for you. And if you use it properly, you can really catch some big fish or see some incredible things. I mean, I think it's almost a tool that should be used for everything. If they're doing search and rescue, it's a great thing to search the bottom with. It's such a detailed thing. It's it can be crucial for if you're trying to map the lake bottom, stuff like that. But I think there is a bright future in it, and at the end of the day, with technology and the way that we advance, it's only getting more advanced. I do fear it getting too good, where it's like, it tells you the exact kind of fish and whatnot. That seems a little bit much for me, but I think I do like the whole principle of Livescope thing.
It is interesting because I do wonder, we always talk about the negativities of this, and like you said, you could use it for search and rescue. I mean, you can literally see somebody, if your friend jumps out in front of the boat in the summertime, you can see a person swimming.
Yeah.
It's crazy how detailed it is and some of the uses. How long did it take you to get used to picking out the differences between a catfish, a bass, a crappie?
So I'll say that I kind of cheated the system a little bit. I did a lot of research in like looking up forward facing sonar, doing a lot of research on YouTube, watching the videos. I saw people, doing it. And then I did have one experience with one of my buddies that had it, and he was kind of showing me the different ropes of it. And then when I fished with Josh, one of the first times I fished with Josh really kind of put it together for me. He was like, this is what this looks like. This is what this looks like. And you can really start picking it out. The catfish, it's really cool. I think it's kind of fantastic. You can literally see the fish eating, like if you're watching, bass, you can watch them feed on shad balls. And it's crazy to see that. I mean, it's remarkable.
It's mesmerizing. It really is, how that works. And how much you can learn. Like you can just sit there sometimes with it. And for all the people that don't like it, I give it a chance just from a fun perspective. And that's the thing is like, I think you can have two conversations about it. You can have the
it's cheating,
The
or if you
cheating,
would in tournaments and
the
whatnot.
tournament, but then the fun aspect. And to me, especially when it's in the wintertime, and I think if most of these people that hate it really quietly to themselves thought about it, when it is 30 degrees and windy and nasty, do you want to drag something on the bottom and your hands feel like crap, or do you want a scope where you can actually mentally be entertained while you're suffering through the elements, and you're going to catch more in the winter doing it?
And I'll tell you this one that kind of adds to that. It's kind of funny. I don't know where you are about, but I'm sure that you have some frozen water nearby.
A few.
The res is completely frozen, and for the past about 10 days, I've been driving there every day trying to see if it's thawed out. There was at one point, there was a point where you could go out and fish this one area, but I missed my window opportunity, and I'm just waiting for it to thaw out right now. But it's a lot of ice out there.
There is a lot of ice out there. So, I mean, getting into the crappie thing, when did you feel like, and I guess I'll do this just to share my screen here, because this is pretty cool, guys. I'll show you this. Here we go. This photo is insane. My God. The journey to, I want the story of this fish, like behind the scenes, so to speak, of what led up to it. Was this a random thing of like, this was my first time out and I caught it? Or was this like, it took a lot of time and effort to build yourself up skill-wise, technique to get to this moment that you had on the water?
100%. It took some time to get up to that point. This was not the first time I went out there. It wasn't the first time I ever seen Livescope. It wasn't the first time I actually had caught a fish of this caliber, but nowhere near the size. I caught a fish roughly this size back in the summertime, and this was taken late November, and that fish really was what sparked it. It was like, okay, there is one big fish in here, and then number two, I can really, if I can figure out this Livescope thing, I can understand, okay, don't even bother to stop here and fish for these fish that are 12 inches, which I know for a lot of standards in a lot of states, that's a big crappie. And that's, for me, if I'm taking home, I know a lot of people don't eat crappie. Some people love eating crappie, diehard. I'm with the diehards. I love eating crappie. But I won't take a fish that's bigger than, about 14 inches, but I won't take something that's less than 12 inches relatively speaking, depending on what lake you're at. That kind of varies lake to lake. So take it with a grain of sand. But this took a while to get to. And by no means did I eat this fish, just so we have that one out there.
Was there a moment, was this something you've been working towards about, I'm just going to go out and try to hunt big ones?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'm still working towards the goal, really. Ever since I caught that first three, it wasn't a three, it was a 2.94 pounder or 2.94 pounds. Ever since I caught that one, it really kind of got me thinking, what if, I have a couple buddies, Joshua Pownor, shout out to him, and Jeff Poston, did talk to me about, this fish, you caught in the middle of August, if you catch the same fish in February, it's going to be huge. And so, I look up the state record. There's white crappie in this lake. And, I know that there isn't a white crappie state record yet. And I know the black crappie state record, although it's pretty big, I don't think it's totally unattainable. And so it's really kind of led me on the journey. Okay, let's catch a three, caught the 3-pounder. I counted the 2.94 as a three because it was in the middle of August. And I'm like, all right, what's going to happen when it gets cold? Let me see can I catch a 4-pounder or something that's 3.5? And sure enough, I caught this one. And that whole story is like, it's honestly a nightmare. That fishing scale is, I love it or hate it. I don't like those Rapala scales. I had one and it broke on me, and I didn't have it when I needed to weigh this fish. And I'm recalling, actually, I got really lucky in that time. Just because when I rounded the corner, there was another guy right there, and I saw him loading up his boat. When we were talking about earlier, I misrecalled the two stories. The first time that I caught that 2.94, That was in August, and then that was when I drove around a bunch of times. So I don't know
Mm.
if you want me to tell that story too, but that was really like the time that it was like, all right, let's go out there and see if we can hunt these, because I'm already catching the 2 pounders that are Virginia citations. I couldn't even tell you how many I pulled now. That the Cabela's fish story. That same day, that was a triple citation day, which I stopped fishing once I caught that fish. I was like, all right, this is it. I called, and I know you want to get. I don't know which way
Did
you
you
want to go with
know?
that.
Because I want to get to the Cabela's thing here too, but when you got that fish on this, I mean, for people that don't know, I'll put an image up here in post production, so we're not lying of the scale of it. How much was that fish?
It was 3.74, and then one of the veterans of the fishing club for that lake, he actually was there and was the one that he was able to give me the scale, and he was sitting there and he even took a picture on his phone. He's like, I never even seen a crappie this big. And to his credit, I haven't, not even in a Bass Pro tank, I didn't even see him fish that big. Yeah.
That's cool.
So
and then, well, that gets into the other thing too that you mentioned. Like, how did the Cabela's thing happen? And just like let everyone at home kind of know the story behind that.
So it really started with that fish. Once I caught that one, I talked to Josh, and Josh was telling me, hey, you can keep that fish alive, and I don't know why you released it. You should have brought it to the local Cabela's. And I was like, really? And so I go a couple weeks later, and I show up to the tank, and sure enough, at Gainesville Cabela's, my local one, I show up to the Gainesville Cabela's, and I see on the aquarium, they actually have a like a wanted poster, if you would, and they are looking for, they still are, they're looking for large fish. And so they had it said on there that the crappie had to be, it said 3 pound with an asterisk, and it was like greater than or equal to 3 pounds. And at the time I misread it, and so I actually thought you had to catch a 3-pounder to get it in there. In hindsight, you don't, because I don't want to ruin the story, but I thought, okay, I got to catch a 3-pounder to get it in there. So I'm like, all right, I think I can do this. So now the goal is, let me catch, I'm trying to break the state record, but I don't think that's, I really don't, at this point, I didn't really know if I was going to be able to do that. I kind of thought, this one 3.374, maybe this was just the crazy odd,
A fluke, a
fluke,
one-off, something like that. Yeah.
They don't get bigger than here. So catch that one. And then I'm fishing. This turned out to be my last day that I fished for 2024. And it was the last fish that I caught for 2024. Funny enough. I was out there. It was fishing. Nobody else wants to be out there. I fish. I'll tell you, I will fish out there in the craziest days. I don't care what it is. I really only want to go out on weekdays, and I get really lucky enough in my work schedule and school that I'm able to go out on just weekdays. So I avoid most people. But I fish out there, rain or shine, pretty much. If it's snowing, even as long as there's no ice. And so I'm out there. It's freezing, but I'm like, I'm about to leave for a trip the next day. And so I'm like, this is the last time I'm going to get the fish. I'm going to be out here, whatever. And so I pull up on my first spot, and immediately, I think the first fish I caught was a 2.25 pound crappie, a white crappie. And that's big. And so I'm like, damn, okay. And, on Livescope, you can see other ones. And I know there's other ones down there. I can see there's 3, 4 swimming around. And I'm like, okay, let me get another one down there. Sure enough, usually when I catch a big fish, I'll kind of place them in the live well, just, get pictures later. I don't do it in the summertime because it's not really good for the fish with how hot the water gets. But if it's cold, I'll put it in there and put them in there, or put her in there, whatever. And then I go down and fish it again, catch another one. This one's 2.15, and it's like a black. Put it in the live well, and I keep fishing. I'm like, all right, catch another one. It was like 1.9. They were all just slabs. I'm like, damn, this is turning to be a great day. Even though the wind's blowing like 30 miles an hour, the spot lock's not even keeping me where I want to be. I'm battling the remote. And I'm like, all right, take my picture, put them back. I'm like, all right, what am I going to do here? It's so cold. My line's freezing the eyelets. And I'm like, do I really want to fish? Yeah. I'm young and crazy enough that I don't really care at this point. And so I drive over to another spot. I'm like, let's check open water. I don't know. Oh, there it goes. Let me check the open water. And so I start kind of just moving around, looking, checking a few spots, just checking open water. And next thing you know, I have a video of this, because at this point I started recording everything on my phone. I would put my phone up to on a tripod right next to the screen and record all the Livescope shots. And so in the video, you can see it's about 42 feet away, about coming towards me. There's a big school of shad. There's hundreds of them going this way. And you can see there's a trail of like crappie or bass that are following them. I'm like, whatever, let me take a cast at it. I was pretty positive it looked like a school of crappie just based on the more football appearance. I pitched the jig out, falls 40 feet, comes down. And if you know crappie, you cannot let that jig go below their head. They're not going to bite it, especially the big ones. They're not biting it if it drops below their head. So I keep it above his head about 1.5 feet, just slowly working it, not really moving it at all. The water temperature was like 45, and it's about 20 feet of water, and it goes over the top. She just singles it out. I got real lucky, and the biggest one out of the group comes up, looks at it, and then I slowly pull her away from the group. Next thing you know, she hits it, and once again it's pull and drag. I'm like, holy, this if this is indeed a crappie, this is a good one. This might be the wanted poster at Cabela's. So I get it in, and it fought for a good minute or two. I'm fighting it good, and I get it up. I have a new net at this time, big net with a nice mesh, the rubberized mesh. That makes a big difference with the treble hooks, I'll tell you that. Not having the net with the fabric, horrible. But anyway, so I get in the net, and in the video, I'm screaming. I'm like, because I knew when you kind of get a feel for them based on the size. I know with the bass too, you get it, And so I knew it was a big fish. I'm like, yeah, freaking out. I pull out. I had a scale at this point. Learned my lesson the first time. Pull out the scale, weigh them. It's 302 on the dot. I weighed again, 302 on the dot. Freaking out. Put in the live well. It's cold. I proceed to start looking through my phone for the picture that I'd taken at Cabela's. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to call this number. Call the number of like a story, great story, any great story. The call doesn't pick up. Nobody there. It goes to voicemail.
Wow.
Like, no way. So I'm like, I'm going to try this one more time. Maybe give it a few minutes. Call again. The lady picks up, and she's like, oh, I'm from the Cabela's fish hotline. And, oh, which district are you in? Which Cabela's do you want to put it in? Okay. Let me call them real quick and see if they're good to receive a fish and take one. And she calls me back about 15 minutes later. I'm sitting on the boat at this point. I'd stopped fishing. I called my mom. I called my dad, because they had known that I was fishing for these size fish at this point. And I'm like, okay, I think I did it. And so 15 minutes later, the lady calls me. She's like, yeah, they're looking to receive a fish right now. How soon can you bring it? I'm like, today. It's like 1:00. I'm like, all right, I can get it there. And she gives my number to this other lady that was the aquarist. I don't know if that's the right term for him, but she takes care of all the aquariums for the local Bass Pro areas. It's cool. Like West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, that's a big field, if you would.
Yeah.
So she gets in contact with me. She tells me, hey, can you bring them over? And I'm like, sure. And I'm ecstatic. I called Josh actually and told him as I'm driving back to the boat ramp. And I get to the boat ramp, load it up. I add some more water in the live well. I'm like kind of like really precautious. The fish is doing good at this point, but I was like a little bit, got to be careful, right?
So are you taking the boat then and just the whole rig over?
Yeah. Well, that was the debate actually. I was going to do that originally. But then I forget what the reason was. But I ended up being like, okay, it's not really. Oh, it was pouring rain that day, and I was like, it's not really worth driving the boat. There's a lot of not very good drivers in this area, and I don't like to take that risk. So I was like, okay, let me fill up a cooler, and I was like, okay, I don't know how I'm gonna fill up this cooler. And long story short, I ended up driving back to the lake, which is lucky enough. It's only about 15 minutes from my house. Filled up this cooler, put it in the back of my car, drove it back, and I'm big into growing plants and whatnot, so I'm familiar with like hydroponic setups, and aquariums are very similar that you need a lot of air in there. So I had a bunch of air stones, and I had this like one of those backup batteries that you can use and plug in, and I plugged in the air stone to that and put it on the fish inside of the cooler, if you would, and ended up driving it to the Cabela's and gave her the fish, which was a pretty surreal experience, if you would. Driving the fish over was a little bit precarious. You don't want to. I was worried the water was all going to spill out, or some idiot wouldn't hit the brakes in front of me, and the water would go over here, or the fish fall out. And so I get it there safely. The lady comes out, and she's ecstatic. I was kind of expecting her to know a lot about crappie, or at least, more than I did. She did not, in fact, know more than I did, but she in fact did say it's the biggest one she's ever seen.
That's awesome.
And so,
dude.
So it really was. It was awesome. Giving it to her, it was, I got to go in the back of like where the aquarium is, and it was kind of like a cool experience. But I gave her the fish, and it was like mid-December. It was December 17th, and just yesterday went out and went over to Gainesville and watched them put her in.
That's freaking wild, man! Congratulations.
Yeah, I got some pictures and everything sitting in front of the fish. It's like that one right there. If you go there, it really is it towers over the other ones. It's the only one that's really pale.
And so for now, guys, if you go there to the Cabela's, right here in Virginia, you can go see that bad boy, which is absolutely incredible. What are some basic crappie fishing 101 stuff? Like, what is your preferred way of catching them, like tackle and rig wise?
So I'm pretty traditional, to be honest. A lot of people, you see some crappie guys out there with a bunch of rods. I am kind of guilty of that, but not really. I got into crappie fishing originally because I didn't have Livescope. It was cold. The bass weren't, I didn't want to go out there and catch no bass, but I had seen videos online saying that you could catch these crappie, in these cold waters, and they're pretty active. And so I started going out with just like an ugly stick at first, and just kind of picking them off. And then I had this, believe it or not, LO Bean makes spinning rods. And I had one of these little bitty lightweight ones, was catching them with that. And then I really was trying to look at, okay, let me get a few more. I really like the ACC crappie sticks, as well as a recent one that I got into that I haven't had a lot of time with yet is the Dobbins Rod Josh Jones series. It's like the Hyperlight. It's like a big 14-foot rod. That's what a lot of the crappie guys say now is you need one of these big rods. I personally haven't gotten too crazy about them yet. I'm going to definitely get into it. But it's, as of right now, it can be a little bit cumbersome, especially on like a shorter boat. I have a 14-foot 1440 low. So it's like a modified V. But it's by no means a big bass boat. And so having those big rods is a little bit hard.
What is your favorite length? I mean, I guess it was the thing, action, but action and length that you feel comfortable using.
So I personally love the 10-foot. That's what I've caught all my all my big fish I've caught with a 10-foot rod. I really think it's like, for me, it's like the all around best. It's the easiest to jig. Like, it's the most manageable, because you get into like the 14-foot rod is good, but the one thing about it is you got to have a net. Like, if you're by yourself, which most of the time I'm fishing by myself, it's especially on my home lake. If I'm fishing with my partner for like the tournaments, different story, but it's mainly just me out there. So having a 14-foot rod, I'm pretty tall. I'm 6'1", but trying to do it is really hard. And so sticking with the 10-foot rod kind of helps. But I would say overall, my 10-foot rod is that, and I personally don't use over a 1,000 size reel, so or a size 50 or 100.
Why?
Just because for me, it's really not
The feel thing.
Yeah, I don't really need that much, and I rather fight the fish a little bit more than kind of horse it in. So I'm more lean on. Originally, I started using braid. I was like really coming from bass. I ran braid to leader, or not true leader, but I'd run a braid to fluorocarbon and mono. And I started doing that with crappie, kind of slowly realizing, oh, you don't really, I knew I didn't need 20-pound braid, but I'm like, I really don't need, this 8-pound leader either. I can size it down to something smaller. So I got into smaller, kind of playing the fish. And Josh really has taught me, especially when you get into these light fish, it is to one extent, it's more fun to fight these big crappie on little bitty light line and these small hooks. It's a lot of fun to do that. So I do really like the lighter weight stuff. I personally have not gotten into bait casters yet with the big crappie pools. I know that's a big thing that I see guys doing. I just haven't got to it yet. I'm still relatively, I've been crappie fishing for probably about a year and a half now. But yeah.
When it comes to time of year, we're recording this, I think, the last week of January. It's going to go up in February. Hopefully we're thawed out by then. Are the crappie, is that considered their spawning time, their pre-spawn? What are they generically doing?
So for the most part, February time, it really depends what the water temperature is. So if it does warm up to that 50 degrees, I know that the crappies start spawning. And I'll tell you this, flat out, I haven't, last year I wasn't very good with the crappie spawn. I really didn't understand it. This year I'm really eager to fish with a guy that's a lot more knowledgeable about it than me, and really learn, this is how you want to do this. This is how you want to dock shoot. Because at my home lake, there is no dock. There's 1 or 2 docks you can shoot. And the big fish are not sitting on a dock. And so there's a lot of techniques that I'm really eager to learn about, especially kind of going back into those bigger rods. A lot of people say that really is, the way so you can be further away from the fish. But as far as right now, I really do think they're kind of just sitting kind of near the bottom. If it is indeed 30, 35 degrees, 34 when it thaws up, I think they'll be sitting near the bottom, kind of in a little bit of a pre-spawn pattern. But I think early March is when they're definitely going to start spawning. Early to late March is really that key period. I always say spring break. If you have spring break for college, it's usually in March. Best time, one of the best times I've heard from crappie fishing. In terms of numbers and then just ease of catching them. However, I did not have that. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, you're good.
I did not have that success last year, but I really didn't know what I was doing.
Do black and white crappie behave differently in just will they school together, or are they almost two unique species in how you approach finding them?
So I've personally never been able to really distinguish, okay, that's, I can tell in the bite. In terms of their actual behavior, I can't really tell the difference between, what the black crappie and the white crappie are doing. I do know that I can tell you. So from this aspect though, what we can do by, pounds or by inches, but I would say, what the 1 pound crappie are doing and what's under a pound, there is going to be completely different from what the 1.5 pounders are doing and what the between the 1.5s and the 2s and the 2.5s is going to be completely different. And so I think that behavior is a little bit more translatable with like the fish, because especially on Livescope, I mean, they don't really have a shape difference aside from when you get it up to the boat and looking at them. And that's one other thing that, is really hard, is identifying a true white crappie, especially these big ones, because you hear everybody's got an opinion on it. If it's a white crappie or if it's black crappie, it needs this many dorsal spin or dorsal
pectoral
spines,
fins or dorsal spines. Yeah.
Yep. And so I think it's really about, if you're trying to break a record for my case, if I'm trying to break a record, it's really in the eyes of the guy that's, certifying it. So whatever it is to him, if I'm trying to do that, will be, what I go with. But as for how I, can kind of tell, would be, the white lateral, not white lateral, but the lateral stripage versus kind of the more spottage and more like intricate kind of patterns on them.
Interesting. That's cool. One thing I want to make sure that we hit on too is you got into tournament fishing, and you're going to be part of, Josh, the Richmond Crappie Tournament Trail. Huge shout out to those guys. Going to have Josh on the show again to talk about his tournaments. The first tournament, I believe, is what? The James?
The James River on February 16th. So
how are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I was supposed to pre-fish, well, not pre-fish there, but I was supposed to just go down and fish with my partner at Lake Anna this weekend. But I got to see if I can get coverage for work. But I'm excited to go down. I already have work off for the whole week, and so with school, I'll be down there for like 4 days pre-fishing. And so me and him will both take our boats down and kind of both go.
Cool. I didn't know you're in school somewhere.
Yeah, so right now I'm doing Nova Community College, just doing classes there and then working part-time as well.
Dude, that's freaking awesome. What do you think it's going to take to win the James if you had to guess? You're going to make a dollar bet.
I would say, so the whole problem is Josh. Josh that's his thing. That's the James, that's his body. So, I mean, I think it's kind of competing for second, but I think to beat Josh, I think you'd have to get above 10 pounds. 10 pounds, 11 pounds, but he'll pull something out crazy and you'll be like, no, what the heck? How should you get this?
And is that for a 5 fish limit, just for people at home that aren't aware?
So with the crappie fishing, it's a little bit unique. They do 7 fish.
Okay.
And then with his tournament, it's 7. And with pretty much every tournament, his is a little bit unique that people can it's more family friendly. And so for the people that want to keep their fish, they actually can off the fish and then put them on ice and then weigh those in, or you can weigh in live fish. However, some people might not know this, live crappie weigh a lot more than the dead ones. And so when you kill them, that takes away some pounds. And I got one of the tournament wins I had to weigh in a dead fish because my partner was like, oh, I'm going to take them home. Just put them on ice. And sure enough, the tournament was based on a 1 fish limit, which is very unique for crappie fishing, but it was based on the sole length. And everybody determined the fish were the same length, so we went to weight, and mine was dead, and this guy's was alive still. And I was like, but mine ended up being a half pound more by some miracle, so.
That is fascinating when I talk to guys that are snakehead enthusiasts, catfish, crappie. Like, you don't really like to kill the big trophy ones. Like, I think there's this weird thing, if you're not in the tribes of fishing, that, okay, because this is a crappie or a snakehead or a catfish, like, clearly people are going to eat the biggest one you catch. And a lot of times it's not true. People are not going to hurt. They're not going to try to hurt a trophy.
Yeah, it's, I think there really is like a perspective of it has its genes and it's, spread them pretty, you want to keep that gene pool alive. I mean, there's something about this crappie that, or, whichever fish it is, that it really is growing at a, larger rate, or it has this succession to the gene pool that makes it have this adaptation that it's a little bit better than the other fish. And so I think that in a way, keeping those monsters alive can actually kind of like make more in the future, hopefully. I'm a firm believer in that, but I am also a firm believer in harvesting fish. I think there's a lot of like research and solid evidence to show that harvesting fish is good, especially if you're trying to keep like the population of the large fish up. But even that being said, in the home lake, there's nobody harvesting those fish. Nobody's
weird.
taking them home. I mean, there is. I shouldn't say that. I do know a fair few guys that take them home. But for the most part, it's not getting, fish like Lake Anna would or Chickahominy, Cheston. All these lakes get slammed for crappie versus, if you find some of these smaller lakes, they don't see that population, that hit on the population, which also makes them a little bit easier to catch. They're a little bit easier fooled. Because one thing that's unique about crappie fishing, especially for tournaments, is they will use live bait. They will use like live minnows on the end of your jig, and they'll toss those. Or you can use plastics. I've only seen, in my experience, I've fished with Josh a couple times. I've won a tournament with Josh actually. We were using minnows. I've only ever had really, great success with these minnows. However, at my home lake, it's not like that. So I don't want to, go too much into that, but it's, it really depends on the body of water that you're at. If you do, go ahead.
I know. I was going to say, this is not a spoiler. The res is good. Why do you think it's good?
I think so I talked to Josh and Jeff about this, and they were telling me that there is other reservoirs that have these traits. So the traits are, it's got two big inflows going into it, right? You got Bull Run, and then you got it comes out of Lake Jackson. I forget that side.
Let me find out. Continue.
And so it comes in from both two sides. It's a reservoir. It has very clean water because they have a horsepower restriction on it. There isn't a ton of erosion. There isn't a bunch of sediment in the water clouding it up. I don't think that affects it too much. But the biggest thing of all is the threadfin shad population. That right there is like the biggest killer, or not biggest killer, but the biggest booster. Because if you have all these lakes, like for instance, Burke Lake, they do have some shad in Burke Lake, if I remember correctly.
Yep, they got shad there, and then it's Broad Run and Bull Run. I just Googled it.
Okay, Broad Run and Bull Run that go into there. So yeah, Burke Lake is kind of the same way, where you can catch. Burke Lake's hard. I'll be honest; it's one of the hardest lakes I've ever fished. I think it's just because it gets so much pressure all year round. But that being said, I haven't gone there very recently and tried to target big crappie or just big anything in general there. But that I wouldn't be surprised if there's big crappie in there too. Anything with shad, I think they just gorge themselves on it because there isn't that many predators also in these reservoirs.
Just
we don't
bass,
there's no alligator guard. Yep.
Yeah.
There's no alligator guard. I mean, there is snakehead now, but for the most part, there isn't. For instance, you go to the south. They have big crappie, but for instance, you got a whole new predator. You got the alligator eating these fish too. So it's like, I think that they don't have a very big natural predator. They've just grown to be out of proportion. We're in Virginia. If you're fishing, I think a lot of people now it's changing a little bit. I think the water's changing, but 5-6 years ago, pretty much everybody around here, it was, you're pretty much bass fishing. Or maybe you're catfishing. There wasn't too many guys doing just like pan fishing. And then you go to Southern Virginia, there's a lot more guys doing the crappie fishing and a lot of that. But especially in this area, there's like nobody doing it. I go out there. I'm the only guy really out there that's only targeting these fish.
That's
like,
crazy.
Seriously. I talked to a lot of the guys out there. There's a lot of great people out there. It's kind of like a community. It's so cool. But a lot of the guys are all fishing for bass, and to their credit, there's huge bass in that lake too. And I think it's kind of the same thing. What is eating those bass in there? I mean, like, aside from like, you got those bald eagles that are, big, they got a couple, some of those big birds and a few other things, but there's not too much they're eating them either. And so I've seen the tournament. It was like however many pounds, it was 9 something. something crazy from the tournament they had. But I think I really do think these lakes where it's I forget the lowland reservoir, if you would. I know it's man-made, but I think that's the right term. But that combination with the river chain is really good. And there's no one of the biggest things is current. Crappie hate current. And so for the most part, there isn't a lot of current there. Although I think I don't think at certain times that the res is horrible for current. I mean, I've been out there one time, you throw the jig and it goes right past you. And I'm like, what is going on?
It can still have river qualities to it just because it's not quite big enough to where, I mean, there are certain portions, I guess you get to the dam where it could be that way, but it still has that river run tendency to it. Do you, if you had to think, do you think that there's a state record swimming around in multiple reservoirs, or is it just going to be one? Like, could it be broken multiple places?
So that's like the thing, right? I mean, I really believe that, this place is pretty special. I really do think it is. Not to put it out there, but because I am like one of the only people that are targeting them. It has a horsepower restriction. It's a very small lake, relatively speaking. I mean, it does cover a lot. I won't say it's pretty small, but it's not very accessible either from like if you're, fishing from the shore, for instance. So in that aspect, I know it does get a lot of pressure, but there's virtually none for the crappie. And so I do think that elevates it a little bit more. But on the contrary to that, I do know there's a couple guys. There's one guy in the fishing club. I think his name's Daniel Goldman. And he does, I don't know, I won't burst his spot, but he has basically the similar setup. And he does a charter service, and he takes out clients to this reservoir that's very similar to the res, and they're catching mondos out of there. Now I have not seen. I think I've seen him pull out a 3 or 2 from there, but I haven't seen one that was bigger than 374. And to be honest, I do think it's in there because that 374 was caught in November. Late November. So it was just like getting into that fall, that winter pattern. And so once they get into that spawn is when they're the absolute heaviest. And so I have a lot of pictures of that fish, of holding it up and whatnot. I can send you them. But the stomach is really like, it looked full, but it's nowhere near what it could be, what some people have seen on these crappie.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
I think there is one swimming around in that reservoir. But is there one swimming around in another reservoir? Possibly in Bugs Island.
Bugs for sure. I mean, that's big enough. I could see that. Do you think the James has something that could compete?
I don't know. From my memory, I don't think there's too many big ins in there. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised. I personally haven't had too much success, too much experience, I should say, fishing in like tidal rivers for crappie in particular. So I am a little bit curious to how that'll go because I've done a little bit of fishing in the Potomac, and it's a little bit of rough up there. There is a good few places, but if you're not there at the right time, you're not really there, and it's especially going out of like what would be Occoquan, lower Occoquan there. It takes so long to go out to some of these points because you have to idle for so long. So it kind of is a little bit of annoying when you idle all the way out there, check the bridges, and there's no crappie sitting on there, and then you're just idling back. So you're like,
Jake,
go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was gonna say because for me, I'm not going out in the Potomac River. I mean, I have, but I've got a John boat, man. Like, it's at the end of the day, it's riveted. I should have bought a welded one, but that's a whole other story. And it's rough out there. I've been out there a couple times where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna turn around and we're just gonna not go out this way. We're gonna stay inland, not explore the big Potomac River because you can get in some crazy waves out there if you're not careful.
You really can. And then I guess Jake, the one thing I want to make sure we mentioned here is your jigs. By the time this episode drops, hopefully you'll have a website, something else like that. Talk to everyone about that.
So I really got into that. That's kind of my family's Montana side. They're all big into fly fishing, and I had saw that in the tournaments there's a couple of prizes of people giving away hand-tied jigs, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know you could make jigs, make them for crappie. What? Okay. So then I started talking to my uncle, who's really he's a professional when it comes to tying these jigs. He doesn't have like a company per se, but he's very, very persistent with it. And so he was showing me, you can do this and this, and you can make them out of this, and you can do this with them because it'll make it do this. And I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. And so I really dived into tying crappie jigs. And so I've really got into it where it's like, you can mimic, you can, get some crazy colors in there. I personally like more natural colors. I have a lot of colors that have worked on my home lake, so they're very inspirational there. But I think it's very cool that, you can make your own jig and then boom, you're catching fish with something you tied, and I'm hoping to get it out there where other people can enjoy it too. The end goal for me, ideally, as the other thing too, is I'm trying to get more into social media and YouTube and kind of do a YouTube channel and travel around fish is the dream here, if you would. Sell some jigs too.
Well, Jake, I'm going to have you back on after this James tournament. We can talk about that. And potentially what we can do is have you show off some of your jigs, and we'll promote your site when you get it up. But that's going to be fun, that tournament. I really appreciate you coming on tonight. Again, so you're thinking 10 pounds then is going to be the winning weight, if you had to guess?
10 pounds. Josh might say differently, but I would say like 10 pounds.
Awesome stuff. As always, guys, link in the episode description to everything that we talked about. I'll also link the Richmond, the Richmond Crappie Tournament Trail as well. Josh's baby, really fun club. Go give them a look-see. Go follow them on Facebook and all their social medias. Like and subscribe to the channel, guys. It really helps out in the algorithm. Also, check us out on Patreon. We only have 24 more spots before I close it down for 2025 and beyond. So if you want all 5 tournaments that we do, that I guarantee a lot of money, go check that out. Like, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.